What are animals capable of? In fact, much more than we expect from them. What about this ability, for example? Manipulation of consciousness. As it turns out, there is no need for a complex multicellular organism, a developed brain, or a complicated society for this. Most manipulators of consciousness are single-celled and simple organisms. If you're familiar with the series The Last of Us, then you're already aware of the manipulations of cordyceps, a small fungus from the sac fungi division. Some underdeveloped fungus forces infected ants to leave the colony, climb a plant, and hang on to it, holding on with their jaws. After the insect dies, the fruiting body of the fungus grows out of it. Essentially, cordyceps turns its host into a vehicle to move to a place that's ideal for maturing and spreading its spores. There are other examples as well. The nematode worm, for example, infects the brains of slugs and snails, making them find a crack in the soil or some other hidden place, burrow into it, and die. And the larvae of worms with the funny name hairworms manipulate insects, mostly mantises and grasshoppers. Hairworms are curious creatures. Their adults are ordinary, free-living worms and prefer freshwater bodies. But the larvae of the worms, Kitaya Pawasi, women education. He definitely doesn't need a teacher from Yumko, but a team of Japanese and Taiwanese scientists found that the larva secretes certain substances that cause the host's body to exhibit polaristaxis, movement toward a source of polarized light. This is exactly the kind of light reflected from the surface of water. The specific substances secreted by the hairworm and the neurochemical mechanisms affecting the insect's brain are still unknown. This only seems to happen to small, simple-minded insects. Surely, such primitive organisms couldn't control a human. Well, how can I put it? Be a fearless leader, win people over with charisma, and launch a successful business. Sounds like the start of a sponsored ad for some success courses from certified info gypsies. But no. What if all of this is just a side effect of your brain being infected by a single-celled alien parasite? Well, okay, let's put the alien part aside for now. But as for the rest, you're about to see something you definitely didn't expect. And by the end of the video, we're sure you'll be reconsidering some of your own behavior patterns. So let's start being amazed by Toxoplasma gondii. While studying this single-celled organism, Australian scientists discovered that it actually turns its victims into zombies. Here's how Chris Tonkin, an infectious disease researcher, explains it. Toxoplasma exports its proteins into the host's brain cell and can change their behavior for its own purposes. Initial studies on animals showed Toxoplasma makes cat scent act as a strong pheromone for rodents. The thing is, the life cycle of this xenomorph goes through two hosts, with the intermediate host being any warm-blooded vertebrate. Take a mouse, for example. The second definitive host is any member of the feline family, for example, a domestic cat. So, in order for the cat to be more likely to eat the infected mouse, Toxoplasma changes the behavior of mice. They become more active and bold. Is that mind control? Well, scientifically, it's called parasite-induced host behavior modulation. We see the same thing in the cartoon Tom and Jerry. What do you think? Did Walt Disney know that, based on clinical symptoms, Jerry is a typical toxoplasmosis-infected mouse? The parasite's goal is simple: to get into the cat's body. Only in its intestines can Toxoplasma reproduce, which is why it makes rodents love their killer. And now, remember, the last time you kissed your beloved cat. We have two pieces of news for you. One good and one bad. Let's start with the bad news. Scientists estimate that at least 30% of people worldwide are infected with Toxoplasma, with some sources suggesting up to 40%. Statistics show toxoplasmosis infection rates in Moscow have risen for over 50 years. Soon, nearly half of all bipeds could be infected with a xenomorph. Now, here's the good news. Although kissing your pet isn't very hygienic, the risk of infection from a cat that's lived in your apartment for a long time is almost zero. And even a kitten from the street is only dangerous during the acute phase of the illness, which is hard to miss. After 2 weeks, it becomes chronic. Cysts form, which remain in the cat for life. Such a cat no longer poses any danger to humans. Well, of course, unless you decide to eat such a cat as a rare steak. And that's not just a figure of speech, because the parasite only reproduces in cats, but it can live in all animals and birds. That's why the easiest way to get infected is to eat undercooked kebab. But real gentlemen know that for some dishes, deep frying is bad taste. For example, for steak. The steak trend arrived in Russia from Paris. But in France itself, people were eating rare meat long before laboratories appeared to check for parasites. Just like in Germany, Italy, and America. If you look at where the most successful global brands come from, it's those same countries. Coincidence? Doubt it. That's what anthropologists from the United States say. They've proven that a person with Toxoplasma often becomes a successful businessman. Here's a quote from anthropologist Stefanie Johnson of the Leeds School at the University of Colorado. "These people don't have the fear of failure that stops others from starting a business." A kind of gene leadership from the parasite is received not only by humans. Infected wolves quickly turn into alpha males. The chance to create their own pack increases. How much would you think? 46 times researchers observed wolves living in Yellowstone Park, in areas overlapping with the range of pumas. These felines, like many others including common cats, are favorite hosts of a single-celled parasite. Why does such proximity put wolves at risk of infection? As expected, in those parts of the reserve where the density of pumas was higher, wolves suffered from toxoplasmosis more often. However, in some cases, the parasite actually helps its host climb the social ladder quite a bit. As the authors note, toxoplasmosis in previously healthy individuals often leads to an increase in dopamine and testosterone levels. It's known that these substances have a significant impact on both sexual and social behavior. The scientists tried to understand exactly how this influence affects populations of wild mammals. As a result, it turned out that individuals infected with toxoplasmosis often choose two rather risky behaviors for this animal: migration and attempts to become medicinal, the leader of the pack. Wolves are social animals that rarely spend long periods alone. Outside the pack, they face a higher risk of being killed by humans or other large predators. In winter, it's hard for them to hunt and feed themselves alone. That's why migrating alone is an extremely high-risk undertaking for a young wolf. Trying to become the leader carries even more risks. Normally, the leader of the pack doesn't attack other wolves in it. If another contender for leadership appears, the leader may show aggression toward him and even kill him. In Yellowstone Park, interest-specific conflicts are actually the most common cause of death among wolves. Human-related causes, vehicles, and hunters are the second leading cause of death, with injuries from hunting large ungulates ranking third. The study of wolf biological samples showed that among individuals infected with toxoplasmosis, the likelihood of becoming a migrant was 12 times higher than that of a healthy wolf. For pack leaders, the effect was dramatic. Those with toxoplasmosis were 46 times more likely to achieve this status than uninfected animals. The authors of the study concluded that the increase in testosterone levels in infected wolves could have led both to achieving a higher social status and to a greater chance of being chosen by females during sexual selection. Just take a look at this footage from a camera trap in Yellowstone National Park. Which of these wolves is infected with the parasite? This graph shows toxoplasmosis-infected wolves in red and healthy ones in black. Wolf packs whose territories overlapped more with cougars had more toxoplasma carriers. The more wolves that overlapped territorially with cougars were infected, the more often the cougars also got sick. The mechanism of parasite transmission between these two species is not yet fully understood by researchers, but the fact is that a higher density of cougars increase the likelihood of wolves becoming infected. Interestingly, something similar is observed in humans. Evolutionary biologist Marcus Rantal conducted thousands of tests and discovered that people with Toxoplasma are much more attractive to others than healthy people. In men with Toxoplasma, testosterone is double the normal level. The parasite also alters hormones, making faces more symmetrical and bodies slimmer. You might wonder, why help a person in their personal life? It's simple. Toxoplasma can also be transmitted sexually. By now, many have already made a great plan. So why not deliberately introduce a parasite into your brain that makes you braver and more attractive? It would seem perfect for our crazy times, when biohackers amaze everyone with their experiments. Some lose weight with tapeworms, while others use frog venom or fly agaric mushrooms to boost immunity. However, you shouldn't do this. And here's why. We found Toxoplasma in many patients with schizophrenia. The parasite disrupts dopamine production and processing in the brain, and this leads to the rapid development of psychosis if there was a predisposition. In healthy people, it simply causes unreasonably risky behavior. There is also a study according to which, among people with schizophrenia in Moscow, there are about twice as many people with toxoplasmosis as among healthy people. Recent scientific data shows toxoplasmosis increases the risk of schizophrenia, not the reverse as previously believed. We are looking forward to scientific studies that will compare how often carriers of toxoplasmosis end up in government and business, and then compare them with the rest of the country's population. I wonder if the results will have any practical significance. Maybe candidates will have to take mandatory tests during elections. Either way, it's worth taking a closer look at your own behavior behind the wheel. Maybe someone deep down dreams of being a racer, weaving swiftly through traffic and leaving everyone far behind? Well, that's just a personality trait. Or is it not about personality? What if it's just a single toxoplasma cell in the brain, commanding 30 trillion cells in the human body to start the process of self-destruction? More and more studies are proving the link between aggressive driving and toxoplasma. Russian scientists tested the blood of drivers responsible for traffic accidents who died in the crash or suffered serious injuries for toxoplasma. So, according to the results of the research, there are twice as many people with toxoplasmosis among them. The question arises, why would toxoplasma want to kill a person? Scientists believe that when toxoplasma gets into a person's head, it's a biological dead end for it. If, as a result of a car accident, the host's brain ends up on the asphalt, then a cat or a mouse might come and eat it all. Then the life cycle of toxoplasma is completed. It turns out this xenomorph just uses cats to manipulate almost every species on Earth. Pumas, wolves, humans. If that's the case, then what ultimate secret goal is it pursuing? That's a good question to ponder in your free time. Well, while you're thinking about it, shall we move on to the superpowers of larger living creatures? Let's take a look at 5 amazing abilities that animal superheroes possess. And the footage you're about to see proves that these aren't just pretty words. Let's go. The shrimp with a plasma cannon. Life on the reef is tough and full of dangers. Racketeering, turf wars, poisoning, and sneaky attacks from around the corner. You can't survive here without caution, strong fangs, and sharp spines. Or you can just arm yourself with a plasma pistol, like the pistol shrimp did. This little guy, no bigger than a finger, doesn't have fast legs, strong armor, or powerful jaws. But it does have a firearm. This creature can break glassware from a distance of 10 centimeters. How does it work? It's simple. Inside its mega claw is a cavity. When it opens its claw, the shrimp draws water into it. In other words, it charges up. When anything resembling an enemy or prey appears on the horizon, the shrimp forcefully squeezes its claw. Then physics takes over. The claw blasts water so forcefully it generates a 190 decibel acoustic wave. Such a sound. First of all, the surface temperature of the sun usually does not exceed 8,000 degrees. So our superhero is armed not with a lousy revolver, but with a high-tech plasma gun. However, the plasma that forms when the bubble collapses is completely useless for killing. It forms too close to the claw. But this effect is quite helpful when building a lair. Pistol shrimp dig their burrows in mineralized coral remains. But shrimp use their limb not only for war and construction. They communicate with each other using loud clicks. Why? So that no one just wanders into their territory, because these creatures are extremely territorial. In some places, the density of crayfish gets so high that the sounds they make interfere with the sonar of submarines and passing ships. There's only one case where a shrimp can tolerate another of its kind in its territory, if that's its mate. Subtitles by Dima Torzok. These crayfish are also strictly monogamous. Even when young and inexperienced, the male and female pair up and stay together for life. The couple is accompanied by a pair of shrimp gobies. These fish rent a corner in the burrow of pistol shrimps, but they don't pay with money or goods. They pay with their eyes. The gobies' eyesight is much sharper than that of the shrimp, so the fish are always on the lookout. If there's any danger, they warn nearby arthropods, then quickly swim into their communal burrow together. Now, take a look at another amazing sea creature, a fish with antifreeze instead of blood. We've all heard the saying, the deeper you go in the ocean, the scarier the creatures. But today, we'll give you a new thesis. The closer you get to the pole, the more sophisticated survival methods organisms choose. What if you combine these two statements, and you get the white-blooded fish, a ghost fish with antifreeze in its veins, roaming the waters of the South Pole? There are only 26 species of white-blooded fish. For deep-sea creatures, our heroes have an unusual appearance. They look like fish, not like something out of the underworld. The creature resembles a stunted pike, and the maximum size it can reach is 70 centimeters. A third of that length is taken up by its giant mouth. The blood of this creature has turned into a colorless liquid full of nutrients. How did this fish end up like this? After all, we all know from biology textbooks that all vertebrates, including fish, need oxygen. Oxygen is carried through the body by red blood cells armed with hemoglobin. White-blooded fish lack both hemoglobin and red blood cells, while in humans, a shortage of red blood cells leads to anemia. But these fish live without red blood cells in the extreme conditions of the Arctic and feel just fine. Meanwhile, the fluid flowing through the fish's body still carries oxygen. But now, the vital gas is delivered to the tissues only in a dissolved form, since this method is much less effective than the standard way of delivering O2. Without hemoglobin, white-blooded fish had to adapt their circulatory system. The fish has 4 times more blood than any other of similar size. Each vessel in its body is noticeably wider, and its enlarged heart is 5 times more powerful than a normal fish's heart. But even that wasn't enough. Polar fish had to give up their scales to absorb oxygen through their entire body surface. They also seriously slowed down their metabolism and carefully conserve every drop of energy to replenish their reserves. So they need limited oxygen. But why did this fish family lose hemoglobin entirely? Didn't that cause them so many problems? That's because it was their only chance to survive. It was once believed that white-blooded fish adapted so radically to South Pole conditions. The blood of most fish freezes at 0.8 degrees, but thanks to their unique composition, white-blooded fish have antifreeze flowing in their veins. They can survive cold temperatures down to -2 degrees Celsius. The antifreeze trick is simple. Ice can't harm red blood cells if there aren't any. Later, scientists found that low temperature tolerance is simply a pleasant bonus. The main reason for giving up red blood cells is a lack of iron in the diet. Young ice fish feed almost exclusively on krill, which never contains any metal. That's an interesting story. But now, let's move on to land. Spider-tailed viper. Imagine that this combo of a snake with a spider on its tail fooled people for almost 36 years. In 1970, biologists got their hands on the body of a somewhat strange false-horned snake. Everything was as usual. 60 centimeters long, sandy camouflage, and scaled horns above its eyes. But at the very tip of its tail, there was a disgusting growth. The creepy formation was surrounded by abnormally long scales. It was only in 2006 that investigators traveling through the eastern provinces of Iraq came across a similar sick animal in its natural habitat. But the snake, deformed by the tumor, was in no hurry to roll its eyes in agony and give up the ghost. It was actively rubbing its tumor against the surface of its body. That's when the scientists understood. The reptile is healthy. It's using its tail to mimic a solpuga, a favorite food of desert birds. The snake mimics so well that all the local birds living alongside the viper don't even try to tell its tail apart from their prey anymore. They simply stopped eating solpugas to avoid falling into the trap. But since birds rarely stick to one territory, spider-tailed vipers always have something to munch on. However, this way of hunting has made the snakes very lazy. During the day, they only do two things: crawl into the shade and return to the sunlight. They don't even crawl to water sources. They restore their water balance by drinking the blood of their victims. The viper does have venom, but it's very weak. After all, mimicry and stealth are the main allies of the reptiloid. Spider-tailed vipers are so secretive and cautious that scientists still don't really know their range, let alone their lifestyle or reproduction. Now let's take a look at another creature whose venom, to put it mildly, is deadly. The terrible leaf frog. This little one has a massive excess of venom. A single touch can kill 250 people. But why does such a tiny creature need such a monstrous concentration of toxin? Let's figure it out now. Terrible leaf frogs, like other tree frogs, prefer to spend their days in the treetops rather than in cool water. Their bodies have adapted so much to their new way of life that these guys decided to get rid of the webbing between their toes completely. Instead, these creatures evolved sticky pads, not feathers, enabling them to climb vertical surfaces and even hang upside down. And of course, anyone who climbs high will sooner or later fall from the sky to the ground. In the case of other frogs, this doesn't really matter to humans. He took the amphibian out of his hair and set it down in the nearest bushes. But the terrible leaf frog is covered from head to toe in toxic slime, and its poison can be absorbed even through the skin. If you don't wash your hands after taking cute photos with the 4-centimeter bright amphibian, your body will start to shut down in about half an hour. The heart will malfunction first, with arrhythmia signaling a problem in your body. A little later, paralysis of the muscles in your lungs and limbs will join in. It can be fatal, so that's a strong argument. Wash your hands after handling tree frogs. Of course, only a small amount of the poison penetrates through the skin. But this toxin is so deadly that just 2 micrograms are enough for an adult per day. The leaf frog can produce up to 500 micrograms of poison. Why does it need that much? After all, potential animals that might eat the toxic amphibian would die even from 1/100th of the human dose. In fact, it's all about the production mechanism. The poison is produced automatically when the frog eats local poisonous bugs and spiders. At the same time, the amphibian itself doesn't get poisoned. Moreover, it takes the weapon of its meal and uses it for itself. But if you switch the dendrobatids to a diet of ants, butterflies, or chickens, after just a couple of weeks, the frog itself can be eaten without any risk to their health. Toxic animals also eat each other without fear. They are immune to their own poison. Frogs aren't shy about practicing cannibalism when there's no other food around. The only reason a dendrobatid would refuse to snack on smaller frogs is if they're its own offspring. When dendrobatids reach 3 to 7 centimeters, they breed frantically throughout the entire rainy season. As it turns out, this amphibian has almost given up water, so the frogs breed on land. The female lays her eggs on moist soil in the shade, and the male carefully takes care of them, moistening them with his slime and regularly turning them from side to side. When the babies hatch, he gathers them onto his back and quickly crawls to the nearest body of water. What a dad! He needs to hurry, because the tadpole's food supply isn't endless. If he hesitates, the babies will start chewing each other on his back. Subtitles by Dima Torzak. And now for dessert, let's take a look at a superhero from the insect squad, Beetle Kachok. This bodybuilder definitely never skipped leg day at the gym. Why does an insect need such a big blade? The obvious answer, jumping, is actually wrong. First of all, muscle strength alone isn't enough for jumping. You need a special joint structure, which this beetle doesn't have. And why jump when this big guy can fly? In short, he's clearly not cut out to be an athlete. Often, comments on shots like this claim he used chemicals to bulk up. And they're not entirely wrong. Frog beetles are a kind of upside-down bar athletes or chitinous Tarzans. They need their mega legs to hang for hours on the slippery leaves of vines. For this, they also have stiff, hairy brushes on the inside of their legs. Excessive hairiness is useless for jumping, but it's perfect for clinging to vines with those bristles. All of this is good, of course. But what about the things that every person should ideally have? What about cognitive abilities? Which animals have intelligence? Let's start, perhaps, with this amazing fact. Cuttlefish passed a cognitive test designed for children. So now we can officially take off our crown. We're not the only intelligent beings on Earth. I'm talking about the Stanford marshmallow experiment. Just imagine all the things they've come up with at Stanford, the results of which show that there's more going on in the strange little brains of cuttlefish than we previously thought. The marshmallow test is simple. Children are left in a room with a marshmallow. They're told that if they can avoid eating the marshmallow for 15 minutes, they'll get a second marshmallow and be able to eat both. This ability to delay gratification demonstrates cognitive skills such as planning for the future. This test lets us determine the age at which to delay gratification if it means a better outcome, but later. Some primates, like dogs, have demonstrated the ability to delay gratification, although inconsistently. Crows have also passed the marshmallow test. 6 cuttlefish were placed in a special tank with 2 closed chambers with transparent doors, so the animals could see what was inside these chambers, and there were treats in the chambers. A preferred live shrimp was in one chamber. The researchers found that all the cuttlefish decided to wait for their favorite food, live shrimp. But in the control group, they realized they wouldn't get it, so they didn't wait. The experiment consisted of several different parts, but the main conclusion is that cuttlefish are capable of self-control, but it's completely unclear why. In species like parrots, primates, and crows, delayed gratification is linked to factors such as tool use, since that requires planning ahead, food storage for the future, and social competence, because social behavior, like providing food for everyone, benefits social species. But cuttlefish don't use tools, don't hide food, and aren't particularly social. All pet lovers like to talk about the intelligence of dogs. They're loyal, obedient, and great at following commands. But intelligence isn't just about following orders. Many wild animals are just as smart as dogs. We just don't notice it. Today, we'll meet real geniuses from the wild. These incredible animals drive cars, solve the most difficult tests, and have even mastered sign language. Let's begin with the most common pigs. Did you know pigs can recognize shapes, colors, and solve children's puzzles? And this piglet is doing a task that many people can't handle. He's sorting trash. The pig picks up plastic cups from the floor and puts them in the yellow box and crumpled paper in the blue one. Of course, pigs don't sort trash in nature, but they have figured out how to use tools. To dig juicy roots out of the ground, this pig uses a stick instead of its own snout. Here are some more cuties. Scientists claim that raccoons have the intelligence of a 3-year-old child, but this little animal turned out to be smarter than some adults. The raccoon walks around the metal trap in a wide arc, but inside the cage there's a bowl of food that smells so appetizing. The raccoon enters from the other side, shakes the trap, and spills the food by flipping the bowl. Great result! The little animal scoops the food through the bars and puts it in its mouth. For delicious food, raccoons are ready for any feat. Moving from bowl to bowl, the little animal turns the latch and opens the doors locked with a hook. He had to fiddle with the first hook, but then Enoch got the hang of it and opened the second hook blindly. This guy would make an excellent burglar. But raccoons have serious competitors. African honey badgers, a young male named Stoffel, learned how to unlatch the lock on his own enclosure. Each night, the four-legged troublemaker picks fights with other zoo residents. To stop the mischief, the keeper fastened Stoffel's enclosure latch with strong wire. After less than 5 minutes, the honey badger climbed the mesh and tore off the wire with his claws. The keeper put a proper lock on the cage and locked it with a key, but Stoffel dug a tunnel underneath. After that, the zoo staff realized that a regular cage couldn't hold the honey badger, so they built a real concrete Alcatraz. To prevent the animal from getting bored, they added a small wooden pull-up bar to the enclosure. Stoffel was delighted. He broke the pull-up bar, dragged the log to the wall, and got out. The keeper removed all the logs from the enclosure. Stoffel thought for a bit, gathered some stones, built a pyramid out of them, and went for a walk. The keeper removed the stones. The honey badger sighed, piled up some dirt, and you get the idea. In the end, the concrete enclosure for the honey badgers turned into a real prison cell. But even that didn't stop Stoffel. The honey badger uses any suitable tools, rakes, shovels, car tires, and still manages to escape from the enclosure. While honey badgers build stone pyramids, rats have mastered driving a car, and this is no joke. Scientists from the University of Richmond have actually taught rats how to drive. The animal climbs into these tiny little cars and presses the levers, making the car go straight or turn. The rats have learned to perform complex maneuvers and can drive along a set route. But the most amazing thing is that the rats actually enjoyed driving the car. Initially, the animals did tricks for food, but now they drive around the enclosure just for fun. By the way, respectful treatment of animals sometimes takes interesting forms. For example, the United Kingdom has opened the first hedgehog recreation park. The United Kingdom's hedgehog population is quickly dropping, from 30 million in the 1950s to just 500,000 by 2018. Many of them died during hibernation because they couldn't find a secluded place and fell victim to predators. According to the company Park Dean Resorts, which manages parks all over England, such a nice little place will become an area where hedgehogs can rest peacefully and survive the winter. However, this care doesn't always seem humane. In the same United Kingdom, the government approved a project to use oral contraceptives to control the growing population of gray squirrels. This invasive species causes 1.8 billion pounds of damage to United Kingdom forests each year. The plan to control squirrel birth rates is based on small pots with bait, which will contain hazelnut paste with contraceptives already mixed in. This way, they plan to reduce the number of these rodents by 90%. Here's another news item. How can you assess it? Elon Musk said Neuralink experts implanted a chip in a monkey's brain, enabling it to play video games using just its thoughts. He said he'd show a video of the animal later. We have a monkey with a wireless implant in its skull with tiny wires that can play video games using its mind, said Musk. He added that the animal is happy. We talked about Musk's chips in pigs in this episode, and now let's take a look at how, even without any implanted devices, primates show such phenomenal abilities that movies about the Planet of the Apes are perceived in a completely different way. Here is a chimpanzee named Ayumu, who proved that his short-term memory is better than that of Japanese students. In the first stage of the test, everything was simple. The monkey was shown numbers from 1 to 9, randomly scattered across the monitor. In just 4 seconds, Ayumu pressed them in ascending order. In the second stage, the task became much more difficult. The numbers appeared in front of the monkey for about 4/10 of a second. Then, instead of numbers, white squares appeared on the monitor, and Ayuma had to select them in ascending order. The chimpanzee completed the extremely difficult test with over 80% accuracy, while Japanese college students managed only 40%. But that's not the limit yet. Look, this is the world's smartest gorilla named Coco. She understood 2,000 words in English and could reproduce 1,000 words in sign language. Coco not only learned concepts like table, banana, and person, but also distinguished past from future and understood abstract terms such as love, boredom, and imagination. Coco even learned to swear. "You're a dirty, bad toilet." That's what Coco called the monkey who broke her favorite toy. It sounds funny, but think about it. The gorilla drew an analogy between the monkey and a toilet, combining them based on a completely non-obvious trait. Isn't that evidence of abstract thinking? The monkey was able to talk about its own feelings and understood what other animals were experiencing. Seeing a bridled horse, Coco pointed to Noddle and gestured that the horse had a toothache. The ability to empathize was so strong that the gorilla got her own pets. She raised several kittens, took care of them, petted them, and fed them. This incredible gorilla even mastered humor. Sometimes, Coco called herself a monkey. The primatologists thought that the monkey used the wrong signs, but Coco explained that it was a joke. Many actions of this incredible ape were absolutely indistinguishable from those of humans. Coco once got mad and ripped the sink from the wall. When she was asked how it happened, Gorilla explained with gestures that it was the cat's doing. But is there any child who hasn't used a similar lie? "Mom, it wasn't me who dropped the plate. It was the cat." Birds are no less intelligent than animals. To test the intelligence of crows, scientists built this complex puzzle. A piece of meat is concealed in a long glass-fronted box. To get it, the crow will need a long stick. It's hidden in a glass container. The container can be opened using stones, and to get the stones, a short stick is needed. It's hanging on a rope. Not every preschooler could handle such a multi-step task, but the crow doesn't give up. The bird immediately pulls up the rope and gets the short stick. Maybe that's enough to get the meat? Unfortunately, no. The stick is too short. A less intelligent animal would have thrown away the useless tool, but not this crow. The bird has already participated in similar experiments. It understands that all the things the scientists put on the table are there for a reason, and the crow begins its own investigation. The bird picks out the stones and tries to push them into the box with the meat. Another failure. But what is this container? Let's see. Wow! If you throw stones into the container, the latch opens and a long stick falls out. Now you can get the treat. Mission accomplished. In the wild, birds also develop clever strategies. Meet the drongo bird. In the wilds of Africa, the drongo acts as a security alarm. When a predator appears, the bird sounds an alarm, and all the savanna animals flee. Are you already admiring the nobility of this little black bird? Then take a look at this. A family of meerkats digs worms out of the ground. The drongo watches their efforts for a while, then lets out an alarm call. Dropping the worms, the meerkats rush to their burrows, and the bird swoops down and grabs the food. Yes, you understood correctly. There was no predator. Drongo lied. You see an octopus on the screen, and it's actually there. These cephalopods look like a meaningless tangle of tentacles, but in reality, octopuses are no less intelligent than dolphins. Just look at this. A tiny octopus is dragging 2 halves of a coconut, and this one grabbed a couple of shells. For octopuses, this load is heavy and inconvenient, but it ultimately helps them hunt. When the octopus spots prey, it quickly crawls into its shelter, shuts the shells, and waits. An unsuspecting crab calmly crawls along the bottom. Surprise! I'm here. The octopus acts as intelligently as a primitive human who figured out to take a stone on a hunt. Cephalopods can handle more complex tasks too. For example, they can unscrew jars. Notice the octopus doesn't try to force the lid off. He knows brute strength won't work. Instead, he braces the lid with his tentacles and slowly twists it. And if you train an octopus a little, he can even take photographs. The mollusk's movements may seem chaotic, but that's just an illusion. The octopus is constantly watching tourists through the aquarium glass. Visitors must stand in front of a special poster, and only then will the 8-armed photographer press the shutter. The trainers say the octopus mastered the process after only a few tries. Looking at such experiments, you start to wonder, are we really the only intelligent species on the planet? And if we, being so smart, have surpassed animals, how did we do it? By the way, scientists have put forward a theory about exactly how. It's actually quite strange, but we can't help but tell you about it. The theory of the stoned ape is being seriously considered. Ethnobotanist and psychedelic advocate Terence McKenna, in his book Food of the Gods, The Search for the Original Tree of Knowledge, claimed that Homo erectus evolved into Homo sapiens thanks to an encounter with magic mushrooms containing the psychedelic psilocybin. He called this the stoned ape hypothesis. McKenna claimed that psilocybin caused a rapid reorganization of the primitive brain's ability to process information. This, in turn, triggered a rapid evolution of cognitive abilities, which led to the emergence of early art, language, and technology. As early humans, he says, we ate our way to higher consciousness by consuming these mushrooms, which he believed grew on animal dung. He says psilocybin lifted us from animal minds to a world of speech and imagination. McKenna, who died in 2000, strongly believed in his hypothesis, but it was never seriously considered by the scientific community during his life. However, a presentation at Psychedelic Science 2017, a scientific conference on psychedelics attended by scientists, doctors, and artists who believe in the therapeutic potential of these drugs, revived interest in the theory. Paul Stamets, a well-known mycologist who studies psilocybin, spoke in support of the stoned ape hypothesis with his talk, Psilocybin Mushrooms and the Mycology of Consciousness. I'm presenting this to you because I want to bring back the concept of the stoned ape, said Stamets to the audience. It's very important for you to understand that 200,000 years ago, the human brain suddenly doubled in size, and there is no explanation for this sudden change in the human brain. How do you like this scientific approach? Moreover, as heretical as it may sound, not only the animal world but also the plant world possesses intelligence. The absence of a brain and nervous system does not prevent plants from perceiving the world around them, learning and remembering, communicating with each other, and responding to external threats. These are complex and highly organized beings. As one of the leading plant researchers once said, the question is not so much whether plants are intelligent or not, but whether we are smart enough to understand them. So maybe there's not so much of a joke in this poster. This lettuce died so you could be a vegetarian. If you care, eat rocks. Let's solve this. Almost 50 years ago, in 1973, a book called The Secret Life of Plants was published in the United States. Its authors claimed plants can tell rock from classical music, sense emotions, and read people's thoughts for therapy. Picky pumpkins like Brahms, Schubert, and Beethoven. But if you play rock and roll, they slow down their growth and try to avoid the speakers. If you believe Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird, plants not only have a refined taste in music, but are also able to predict the future, sense danger, and respond to the suffering of others. The authors refer to experiments by criminologist Cleve Baxter. He studied the minds of plants using a polygraph. The Dracaena bushes would become stressed whenever Baxter was about to set them on fire. The rhododendron recognized truth from lies. The philodendron felt for shrimp dying in boiling water. Some research was debunked, yet it still shaped culture. People began talking to plants and playing Mozart for them. As the Israeli biologist Daniel Chamovitz points out, the secret life of plants actually slowed down the development of the science of plant behavior. Anyone who started drawing parallels between the abilities of animals and plants was immediately considered crazy or a charlatan. However, plants really do have a secret life, and it turned out to be much more interesting than the book by Tompkins and Bird. In 2006, a group of 36 scientists announced the creation of a new scientific field, plant neurobiology. Its participants argue that even though plants do not have neurons or a central nervous system, they possess advanced intellectual abilities. Plants actively adapt to their environment, possess memory, and have the ability to learn. At the very least, in a rudimentary way, plants think. Of course, not like humans or animals, but no less effectively. Many researchers define intelligence as problem-solving ability. If we agree with this definition, then we have to admit that plants are very intelligent. Intelligence is a property of life that even the most primitive single-celled organism possesses. Every living creature constantly has to solve problems that, in essence, are not very different from the ones we face. A seed's fate is set once it leaves the tree, falls, and starts to sprout. Plants, unlike animals, are tied to their habitat. It's no wonder that it's so hard for us to understand plant life. We have chosen a mobile strategy of existence, while plants have chosen a stationary one. In his treatise On the Soul, Aristotle wrote that living beings differ from non-living things by two characteristics: movement and sensation. 2-year-old children would probably agree with Aristotle. Psychologist Jean Piaget showed that children believe anything that moves, like water, wind, smoke, clouds, and plants, has emotions and consciousness. It's easy to animate things. They move, but so slowly, we barely notice. For example, some sequoias can live for 2,000 years. Trees experience childhood and youth much longer than humans. Even such active processes as budding and leaf unfolding take weeks and months. The nervous system makes us very fast creatures. Signals from the brain to other parts of the body are transmitted in a fraction of a millisecond. Communication between plant cells is carried out with the help of calcium elements. They also have electrical signals, but they are transmitted much more slowly, about a centimeter per second. But this speed is a poor criterion for intelligence. If extraterrestrials with accelerated metabolisms visited Earth, they might see humans as slowpokes, hardly different from rocks or plants. As one of the most prominent researchers of plant intelligence, Stefano Mancuso, points out, plants possess the same set of senses as humans: vision, smell, hearing, taste, and tactile sensations. They're analogs, to be precise, plus at least 15 more, such as analyzing water composition, light spectrum, detecting pathogens, sensing soil tilt, and magnetic fields, because they spend their whole lives in one place. Plants need to gather as much information about their surroundings as possible. They do this by interacting with their environment and communicating with each other, making them social beings like us. When a giraffe begins eating an acacia, the tree raises toxins in its leaves within seconds. South African zoologist Van Callen discovered that acacias signal each other to warn about approaching herbivores. Giraffes know this, so they move about 100 meters away before feeding at another tree. Many plants can recognize an enemy by the composition of its saliva and, depending on that, choose a defense strategy. For example, acacias use ants to protect themselves from caterpillars and insects. Ants patrol tree branches and remove threats in exchange for sweet nectar. The plant adds a neuroactive substance to the nectar, which ants get addicted to like a drug. Plants transmit signals. Canadian ecologist Susan Simard found that trees connect over long distances via underground fungal networks. Tree roots and fungi form a symbiotic relationship known as mycorrhiza. Through this branched network, trees exchange water, sugar, potassium, and other nutrients, and also warn each other about danger. Simard found that trees can distinguish related species from unrelated ones. Mother trees form a more extensive connection with their offspring, transfer more carbon to them, and even slow down the growth of their own root system. To give their children more free space, trees often support their relatives who have suffered from disease or herbivore attacks. A plant can survive without leaves by feeding through mycorrhiza. Plants connect with each other through distributed networks, a kind of underground internet. But that's not all. Each plant is also a network itself. As Stefano Mancuso explains, plants have a modular structure, so removing 90% of their parts doesn't necessarily kill them. Plants are very resilient because they lack a nervous system and central control. The internet is organized according to these very principles. From Mancuso's point of view, many millions of years ago, plants invented our free and decentralized future. But do plants possess intelligence? Let's see. Plants are capable of learning. After an especially dry year, trees start conserving water, even if there's plenty of it now. Some plants have something similar to conditioned reflexes. Monica Galliano studied the mimosa, which folds its leaves when touched. They dripped water on them at intervals. Initially, the leaves closed when drops fell, but soon they stopped. The mimosa realized the water wasn't a threat. This reaction continued even after 28 days when the experiment was repeated. If plants have memory, it must be stored somewhere. But where, if not in a brain? Charles Darwin, in his final work, The Power of Movement in Plants, suggested roots act as a brain in plants. They avoid obstacles without bumping into them and sense moisture and nutrients from afar. They always find the shortest, most optimal path for growth. Distinguish beneficial from harmful fungi and relatives from outsiders, and are the plant's most long-lasting part. Stefano Mancuso and František Belusca discovered sensitive structures at the tips of roots, where the highest oxygen consumption occurs. Special electrical impulses are generated here, similar to those in nerve cells. Roots also contain neurotransmitters, but scientists are unsure of their function. But the problem is that each plant has millions of roots. There's nothing like a centralized nervous system. Plants aren't just small green people underground. Instead, they resemble a colony of ants or bees. While one bee lacks intelligence, together they display complex, intelligent behavior. Each plant is a colony of roots and leaves. Plants have managed to develop very stable and effective mechanisms for adapting to their natural environment. Recognizing plants as intelligent doesn't require attributing self-awareness or abstract thinking to them. Research on plant behavior has led some philosophers and biologists to redefine intelligence. Back in 1984, scientists Umberto Maturana and Francisco Varela equated thinking with perception and self-organization. If they're correct, then all living things have a mind. Even bacteria know something about their environment. Otherwise, they couldn't survive. Plants make up about 99% of the Earth's biosphere by mass. This shows they've become skilled at solving survival problems. Plants can live without us, but we can't live without them. In the novel Blind Sight, science fiction writer Peter Watts depicted aliens who are far superior to humans in terms of technical and intellectual development, but who lack self-awareness. Their civilization is a huge hive. A plant has this same quality and at least one more advantage. They won't try to destroy us. It's hard for humans to understand plant life because it's so different from ours. But to deny plants intellectual abilities just because they don't have a nervous system is an unacceptable form of zoocentrism, according to philosopher Michael Marder. Intelligence doesn't emerge at one point, but is spread across the whole evolutionary tree. Maybe before rejecting the existence of plant intelligence, we should try to understand what the plants themselves think about it? In 2008, the Swiss Federal Ethics Committee on Non-Human Biotechnology recognized that intentionally causing harm to plants is morally unacceptable. Do the Swiss think that it's time to deprive vegans of their last meal? Hardly. Rather, it's an attempt to draw attention to the fact that plants exist not only to satisfy our needs. They have their own lives, which we still know little about. And probably almost every viewer of this video has their own story from personal experience that will make them think about all of this. Now, let's discuss the epic battle between humans and invasive species. These are species that were introduced by humans into an ecosystem, and in the vast majority of cases, this led to major problems in the original ecosystems. Let's look at the most amazing and illustrative examples. The most unusual crustacean on our planet is the mutant crayfish marmocrab, which can clone itself. It appeared less than 30 years ago, and it's still unclear how that happened. The thing is, all marmocrabs are female, and in fact, they lay fertilized eggs on their own without any male involvement. And the little crayfish are also all female. The marmocrab, or marbled crayfish, is thought to have appeared in the early 1990s and was initially bred as an aquarium species. You only needed to buy one crayfish, and after maturing, it would quickly lay eggs. You could keep giving the babies to your friends until you got tired, since it was a hassle. Each new pet lays many eggs. Soon, crayfish began to appear not only in pet stores, but also in bodies of water. Owners, not wanting to raise a whole herd of crayfish, decided to release the young ones into the wild. Moreover, all marmot crabs are female, and they never needed a male to reproduce. They simply grew, matured, and were ready to lay eggs again. Now it seems like marble crayfish are taking over the world. If you release a crayfish into water, it will eventually lay eggs, resulting in dozens of new inhabitants. They grow up and lay eggs again, from which mother copies hatch. And so it goes in a cycle. Moreover, these animals adapt perfectly to any living conditions and can even crawl from one body of water to another, reaching neighboring lakes and streams at an incredibly frightening speed. So now marmot crabs can be found in bodies of water all over Europe. The ability of the marble crayfish to reproduce and adapt like this is a real superpower, because the population of this creature is growing exponentially. For example, in 2007 it was brought to Madagascar, and in just a decade. Their numbers here are in the millions. That's exactly why in Japan and in some United States states, it's forbidden to sell these animals in pet stores, because these crayfish can simply overwhelm the local fauna. Here's a clear picture showing the European countries where marbled crayfish already live in the wild. It's believed that the first marbled crayfish appeared in Germany. It's assumed that it may have been bred artificially. Its direct ancestor is the slough crayfish, Procambarus phallax. During one of the crossings, one of the slough crayfish had a mutated sex cell that contained a double set of chromosomes. As a result, the first female marbled crayfish appeared. She had 3 chromosomes instead of the usual 2. All the others descended from this individual, and they all have an identical genome. In other words, they are all essentially clones of that very female that appeared in the 1990s. Being a species of only clones is a total advantage. One small crayfish can produce a large number of offspring, and all its young are just as fertile. With such a reproduction rate, nothing can stop them to take over new territories. That's why the marmot crabs is considered one of the most dangerous invasive species. But there are others. Guam is a small United States territory in the Pacific Ocean, halfway between Australia and Japan, covering 544 square kilometers. Japan captured Guam in World War II. American troops liberated it in 1944. But along with the American military equipment shipped from neighboring Papua New Guinea, new and much more dangerous invaders arrived on the island, namely brown tree snakes, small, mildly venomous arboreal snakes. Island ecosystems are the most sensitive to invasions. Remote islands often lack predators, as they can't reach such isolated areas, leaving conditions unchanged for years. Here, evolution creates endemics, unique, one-of-a-kind species that are found nowhere else and disappear from any unfavorable external impact. This is exactly what happened to almost all of Guam's birds. Having never seen snakes before, they simply couldn't withstand the boiga snakes, which occupied the vacant ecological niche of a bird predator. The snakes, thriving in a warm climate with no predators and plenty of food, began breeding rapidly, growing up to 3 meters instead of the usual 1 or 2. The island's forests became eerily silent, lacking birdsong, filled with snakes, and covered in webs. After all, having lost their natural enemies, the local spiders also began to multiply at an incredible rate. But now, the forests themselves are struggling. Previously, birds and bats pollinated the trees and spread their seeds. Now, there are far fewer seeds, and those that do form remain under the parent trees, where the lack of sunlight reduces their chances of survival. Guam's future remains uncertain. Despite the United States military dropping paracetamol-laced poison baits to fight snakes, the damaged ecosystem can't be restored. Moreover, there are military bases and a large port on the island. It is possible that right now, in the hold of some ship, boiga snakes are traveling to other islands to spread chaos there as well. Let's leave the harsh fate of Guam behind and move to another American territory, The Florida Peninsula, paradise beaches, vast swamps with water cypresses, and a staggering number of more than 500 invasive species of animals and plants. Asian rhesus macaques and Yemeni chameleons from the Arabian Peninsula roam the branches. Underwater, like vacuum cleaners, poisonous lionfish that have entered the seas from Southeast Asia suck in the local fauna. And through the unique Everglades swamps, thousands of giant Burmese pythons glide. Let's focus on the latter in more detail. Strangely enough, they can reach over 5 meters in length. Snakes were once very popular pets in the United States, with tens of thousands imported. Eventually, some careless owners released unwanted pets into the wild. However, there is a theory that the key moment in the spread of snakes was a hurricane that hit Florida in 1992. Among the buildings it destroyed was a python farm for terrariums. The first discoveries of these scaly giants in Everglades National Park date back to the 1990s. The snakes then went underground for 10 years. People began discussing an established population in the 2000s, when large pythons started getting hit by trucks on Florida roads. Nowadays, the reptiles living in the state are already numbered in the thousands. Because of the impenetrability of the vast tropical swamps, which have gladly welcomed the snake into their midst, it's very difficult to accurately estimate the population. One Burmese python like this can wipe out dozens or even hundreds of mammals, birds, and reptiles. Even populations of common species like raccoons and opossums have declined by 90%, and, for example, foxes and marsh rabbits have disappeared completely. Moreover, pythons don't limit themselves to mammals. They've been found with semi-aquatic birds like herons in their stomachs, and even alligators. By the way, alligators are the only animals in the swamps that can occasionally win a fight against these outsiders. However, their numbers are still too low to control the fast-growing snake population. Florida hunters can't handle them either, even though they kill hundreds of pythons every year wherever they see them. The paradox is that invasive species are dangerous not only for ecosystems, but also for humans themselves. For example, the Black Sea mollusk Rapina, first discovered there in the 1940s. The hardy shell likely reached the resort on ship hulls, transported via the Trans-Siberian Railway after the Russo-Japanese War. Once in the warm waters of the Black Sea, Rapina began actively eating all the bivalve mollusks it could reach. It wiped out several endemic species and nearly exterminated commercial species like the Black Sea oyster, mussels, and scallops. Perhaps in some other sea, there would be a way to control Rapina, but not in the Black Sea, where its main natural enemies, sea stars, cannot survive due to the low salinity. But the spread of Rapina was not the last chapter in the story of Black Sea invaders. The vanished oyster and mussel fisheries were just the beginning. The real trouble started in 1982 when the ctenophore Menemiopsis arrived in the waters via ship's ballast water, causing an ecological disaster. The ctenophore almost completely wiped out the plankton stocks, and as a result, fish populations were pushed to the brink of extinction. Already by 1989, the number of ctenophores reached up to 400 individuals per cubic meter of water. The anchovy, nearly the main commercial fish in the Black Sea, suffered greatly from the food shortage. Unable to compete with the voracious ctenophore, the small fish nearly became extinct. Additionally, the floating anchovy roe developing in the water was ruthlessly destroyed by the invasive gluttons. Finally, without natural filtration, eutrophication began in the sea. Pollution from too much organic matter. This caused lower oxygen levels in the water, reservoir overgrowth, and the spread of harmful microorganisms. The situation improved when another ctenophore, Biro, a natural enemy of Menemiopsis, arrived in the sea with the same ballast water. By reducing the Menemiopsis population, Biro eased the pressure on plankton, and fish returned to the Black Sea once again. However, restoring the stocks to former levels was not possible. Another interesting example is the coqui frog, brought from Puerto Rico to Hawaii. The only way to eliminate the thousands of tiny frogs occupying the entire archipelago, from parks to mountain forests at 1,170 meters, is to burn Hawaii with napalm. How can such a small creature impact a whole state's economy? The answer lies in the very name of the frog. because Koki is an onomatopoeia. Constant frog karaoke has seriously impacted the Hawaiian real estate market. People won't buy homes in areas with many amphibians because it's too hard to sleep there. And tourists aren't happy about the screams reaching up to 73 dB either. In conclusion, let's mention another species, the oil palm, which has long been known to people as a food crop. In the 20th century, it spread worldwide from its native West Africa. Corporations saw potential in this rapidly growing crop, which yields 9 times more oil than soybeans, quickly leading to plantations across tropical regions worldwide. Hectares of forests were cleared for palm, replacing unique ecosystems and diverse wildlife with endless identical trees. Sumatra stands out in particular, having lost 40% of its green cover because of the invasive palm. Scientists have calculated that between 1990 and 2008, clearing land for palm plantations accounted for 8% of all global deforestation. Restoring primary tropical forests with the highest biodiversity genuinely takes hundreds of years. Its speed is simply laughable compared to how quickly the oil palm takes over new territory. It is believed that every hour, an area of forest equivalent to 300 football fields is cut down for new plantations. You could talk about invasive species for hours. People constantly encounter many of them in everyday life, whether it's Sosnovsky's hogweed or the box tree moth that destroyed the boxwood forests of the Caucasus. As you watch this footage, another uninvited passenger is likely traveling in a ship's hold to the other side of the world. But the animals themselves are not to blame for destroying the ecosystem. They simply adapt successfully to new conditions, as nature requires. Biological invasion results from human activity, causing severe, nearly uncontrollable consequences with significant impact. We can only hope we have the sense to fix everything and prevent future ecological disasters. And these inspiring examples of friendship between people and wild animals prove that humanity is quite capable of achieving this. For example, this man's name is Kevin Richardson. In 2007, one of the British newspapers called him the Lion Whisperer, and this nickname stuck to the famous zoologist, because when you watch his relationship with these wild cats, no other words come to mind. As the famous Zapashni brothers like to say. But the essence of Richardson's relationship with his wards is completely different. No, there are no cages. It all started in his early childhood. Kevin was born in a suburb of Johannesburg in 1974. As the zoologist jokes, he was a lion in a past life, so since age 3, only the wild mattered to him. After enrolling in the university's zoology department, he dropped out 2 years later. He was just bored studying basic biology with amoebas and bacteria. He felt drawn to the big, clawed predators he'd loved since childhood. Kevin chose work over physiotherapy like his brother, deciding animals would just be a hobby. But fate and love are inescapable. While working in his field, Kevin met Rodney Farha, the owner of a famous lion park for training circus animals. After learning about the young orthopedic assistant's passion for wild cats, he allowed him to participate in raising 2 adolescent lion cubs. What happened next shocked the owner of the park. Richardson practically bonded with the animals. He slept, walked, and swam with them. Today, Kevin Richardson is a world-renowned zoologist and behaviorist. This means he specializes in studying animal behavior. He believes that only on the basis of love, respect, and trust can you build a real relationship with wild animals. Kevin manages a huge park called the Wildlife Sanctuary. It's a private reserve covering 800 hectares. Geographically, this park is part of the Lion Park, Gauteng Viewer, and Kevin helps preserve this corner of nature from destruction and extinction. Kevin forms close, trusting bonds with predators like lions, leopards, and hyenas, which have complex social hierarchies. It's hard to believe, but the lions don't see Richardson as a trainer or a master. These are not animals in cages with broken wills. These are proud beasts living in natural conditions, where they hunt and form their families. For them, Kevin is one of the members. He sleeps next to lions and tigers, eats and plays with them. They drink water from his hands. Lionesses calmly let him near their cubs, and hyenas ride in his car. Next to him, an adult lion with a magnificent mane behaves like a gentle kitten. Of course, Kevin admits that contact with lions is not safe, and he does get injuries and bites because even when playing, these are huge and powerful animals. But he has no fear. Kevin's method relies on his unique approach. Richardson intuitively senses animal moods and understands their signals. Even though the lions, predators, consider him a member of their family, he never breaks the rules of lion etiquette when interacting closely with them. Kevin never disturbs lions when they're sleeping, avoids getting too close while they eat, doesn't scare them, since fear can provoke attacks, and never behaves intrusively around them. Richardson has a special relationship with the hyena clan. These animals have a unique matriarchal social system, and Kevin has miraculously fit into their group. He genuinely doesn't understand why these animals have such a negative image. He does his best to change this situation. He does it by educating people through films and books. In South Africa, Richardson isn't the only person who goes to great lengths to interact with animals. This is about Dean Schneider, a young Swiss man who left a prestigious job, sold his property, and moved to Africa. With the money he raised, he built the Haku Reserve on a 300-hectare territory. His main goal is to help animals that have suffered at the hands of poachers. The reserve has separate large areas for zebras, antelopes, hyenas, and baboons. Din also cares for elephants. Din chose the name because it means without limits in Swahili. Din is certain he'll devote his life to protecting wild animals because he truly loves them. He is sure that we, as humans, must protect what we love, respect animals, their nature, and their character. However, to see a real lion park, you don't have to go to Africa. The largest private park for wild predators in Europe is located on the shore of the Taigan Reservoir and, accordingly, is called Taigan. The park spans 32 hectares, with 20 for the Lion Safari Park, and the rest for a permanent zoo and children's petting zoo. Taigan is home to 60 lions. Alexei Zubkov, the park's owner, brought together rare white lions and white Bengal and Amur tigers in one location. A tenth of the entire population of rare Amur cats lives right here in Taigan. The park, which opened in 2012, has become a leading center for reviving lion and tiger populations, including rare African white lions. Most of the cubs, when they reach adulthood, are sent to their natural habitat, to reserves and sanctuaries, as part of ecological reproduction programs. Russian zoologist and professor Nikolai Nikolaevich Drozdov says Zubkov and his Taigan Park are unique and deserve full support. In addition to the big cats, there are even more amazing stories connected with another wild species, which, strangely enough, still has a negative reputation. And what you are about to see will forever change your attitude toward these formidable predators. Kirill Potapov says that he has been fanatically in love with animals since childhood. When he came back from a walk, his parents would always search him to see if he had brought home a mouse or a snake in his pocket. He tells us, Kirill's work with predators started when he bought Canadian wolves Alpha and Ugolyok. Later, polar wolves Raksha from Izhevsk Zoo and Akela from Ivanovo Zoo joined them. They offered predators, but there aren't enough enclosures. Potapov's wolves now live with birds of prey in a nursery in Kashino, near Yekaterinburg. The wolves are joined by 2 husky dogs, a lynx named Dakota, and 2 roe deer found by locals in the forest and raised by the center's staff. The businessman built the enclosures and houses for the predators himself. He says he consulted Americans due to Russia's lack of experience and had to read English literature. Potapov posts about the wolves' daily lives on Instagram, where he has around 100,000 followers. Just 1% are from Yekaterinburg, 15% from Russia, and the rest are foreigners. Turkey is in first place, where the wolf is the national animal. There are Americans, including like-minded biologists, from Switzerland, Italy, Brazil, and the Seychelles. I want
To break stereotypes, to show the true face of the wolf. Many fairy tales have demonized this animal, turned it into an enemy of humans, but that's not true.
says Potapov. For example,
Few realize that wolves have a genetic fear of humans, called anthropophobia, and also neophobia, a fear of new smells and objects. I communicate with American biologists from the International Wolf Center. They have been studying these animals since 1965. In the United States, only 2 recorded wolf attacks on people occurred in 100 years, both involving rabid animals. If you don't threaten them, they won't attack you unless it's in self-defense.
Sean Ellis is a well-known British zoologist, author, host, and main character of the Animal Planet show Living with the Wolfman. For the sake of studying animals, Sean gave up the comforts of civilization and lived with a wolf pack, even becoming their leader for a while. He understands wolf howls, recognizes each one by face, and perfectly imitates their behaviors. To remain part of the pack, Sean ate what the wolves ate, slept with them on the bare ground, and didn't use regular cleaning products. To conduct truly unique research, Sean had to become a wolf while still remaining human. Sean's fascination with wild animals began in childhood on his family's Norfolk farm, and the first subjects of his observations were foxes and badgers. Sean learned to navigate at night by sound and developed an animal-like sense of smell. Sean started as a gamekeeper's apprentice, served in the Marine Corps, and after returning, devoted himself to zoology and animal observation. Ellis began working with wolves in 1990 in the United States, in the state of Idaho. He lived for 7 years in a Native American tribe, observing wolf packs at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. He recorded wolf howls and learned to understand and reproduce them. He recognized everyone by face and concluded that wolves are highly intelligent with remarkable instincts. In Idaho, Sean first lived with wild wolves, and they accepted him. In 2005, Ellis purchased from hunters. A wolf orphaned by hunters joined them in the forest. At that time, Sean was already considered an authoritative wolf expert. He was married and had 4 children. And now, in his pack living in Devonshire National Park, there are already 17 individuals. He used to be the leader for the wolf pups, but when they grew up, one of them challenged Sean and took the best piece of meat from him. The man submitted to the wolf and remained in the pack. Today, Sean Ellis is a world-renowned scientist. He conducts his research in the United Kingdom at Camp Martin Wildlife Park, where his pack lives. According to Sean, his goal is to revive the population of wild wolves in the United Kingdom, which were exterminated in the country back in the 17th century. Many think wolves are bloodthirsty,
Killers.
says Sean, but that's
Not true. For me, wolves,
are a big and loving family.
I love them like my own family too.
But for dessert, we've also prepared another amazing story for you from a person who can tell about his life with wolves in Russian. In Georgia, which the ancient Persians called Gorgistan, meaning the land of the wolf, he lives and studies animal behavior. Doctor of Biological Sciences Yasin Badridze. An acquaintance describes him with a short phrase: an ethologist who lived for several years in a wolf pack. Yasin Badridze chose to study wolves in the wild in the late 1960s after graduating from Tbilisi State University's Faculty of Biology and working at Georgia's Academy of Sciences Institute of Physiology in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. However, ethology is a field discipline of zoology that studies genetically determined animal behavior. In the Soviet Union, like genetics, it was considered a pseudoscience, and wolves were regarded as the main enemies of socialist animal husbandry and were exterminated en masse. Therefore, Badridze could only rely on underground research. Still, neither this nor the clear danger of facing a wild animal deterred the scientist. The scientist joined the wolf pack in January 1974. In the forestry of the Borjomi Reserve, at that time, wolves were being exterminated even in protected areas. Not only were they being shot, but they were also poisoned, trapped, and caught in snares. Rangers earned 50 rubles per wolf killed, compared to an average salary of 150 rubles. This financial incentive encouraged predator extermination. But Badridze ensured rangers stayed away from his research by paying them and requesting they avoid his wolves' territory. But how could Badridze gain the trust of a pack of predators without any firearms?
A weapon makes a person bolder, taking risks and complicating situations because he knows he has a gun.
He says. Jason wasn't a member of the wolf family, but he lived next to them. First, he figured out their main trails, then got them used to his scent. All of this took 4 months. After a direct encounter, when the alpha wolf, the male, and the man met eyes from 5 meters away, he became one of them. The scientists slept in the same place as the wolves and even hunted with them. Deer were the primary prey for wolves in the Borjomi Reserve. Of course, the man didn't attack the deer. That's the job of the dominant male, but he tracked, meaning he cut off the deer's escape route with the young wolves and yearlings. The young Badridze ran pretty well, so of course he lagged behind the swift animals, but not by much. As a reward, after eating their fill, the wolves left him meat on the deer bones. Unlike his gray friends, the scientist didn't gnaw bones. He cut off meat and cooked it over a fire across the river to avoid bothering the pack with smoke. He usually ate canned stew, lard, and bread delivered every few weeks by a familiar gamekeeper. Sometimes he returned to Tbilisi to avoid becoming completely wild, but only once every 3 months for a few days, or the pack would forget him. One day, returning from an unsuccessful hunt with the pack, the scientist accidentally disturbed a bear resting by a boulder, and that could have been the end of the future professor's research. Usually, wolves don't risk messing with bears, who are much stronger than they are, so such protection is a sign of the highest trust. The man became a full-fledged member of the pack, even though he was of a different biological species. And so, 2 years passed. What did Badridze learn about wolves' lives from this unique experience? A wolf pack is a family in more than just the biological sense. The bear story highlights strong mutual assistance among wolves, not just between parents and offspring. Altruism wasn't created by humans, and for the sake of the members, he could leave home, and he could. Periarchy, young wolves about 1 or 2 years old, take good care of the pups born this year. They also look after the old wolves, picking out their fleas, and bringing and regurgitating food for them. If someone shows too much aggression, they are expelled from the hunting area. Wolves are not born predators, they become them. If
a wild wolf enters the herd
of sheep, he will simply
be in a panic. He has no idea that this is food,
explains Badridze. The parents teach them gradually. First, they bring meat, then meat with skin, so that the puppies remember the animal's scent. They then guide them to fresh prey, teaching them to track and follow trails, all within the pack. A zoo-born wolf can't feed itself even in a forest full of deer. When hunting, wolves use a connection between each other that could be called telepathic.
There is sound, scent, and visual communication, as well as a kind of nonverbal, telepathic connection. This is very noticeable before a hunt. It's like they're having a meeting, looking each other in the eyes with a fixed gaze, and then the animal turns, goes, and does exactly what turns out to be the right thing to do at that moment.
Badridze has experienced this while hunting. He instinctively moved to the best spot to block the prey's path, and started noticing exactly what the wolves were doing behind him. However, after returning to civilization, this ability disappeared. So, how did it all end? As often happens in life, the family idyll did not last long and ended tragically. After 2 years with wolves, Yasin Badridze returned to the city. He remembers their mournful howls as they saw him off, and a year later, when he returned to the Borjomi Reserve, it turned out that poachers had killed almost 60 wolves, including those he had lived with. In his research, Badridze had to use, he says that no pack ever touched his soul like that first one. Over the past decade, the scientist has worked to preserve Georgia's wild wolf population by buying wolf cubs from hunters, raising them with proper wild training, and releasing them into the forests. He also had to teach them to fear humans so they wouldn't approach villages and kill sheep. This way, wolves raised in captivity were returned to the wild. Since 1998, Yasin Badridze has not raised wolves. His health has declined. At 75, you can't keep up with a wild animal. Now his main activities are office research, writing books, and giving lectures. Even now, this calm elderly man keeps repeating, "It's foolish,"
To see something evil in the wolf, or in nature in general, in any of its manifestations.
and bloodthirsty. Like
These animals, like all other living creatures, live according to
their nature and never take more from nature than they need.
the only one,
And the most terrifying animal that stands out from this harmonious picture.
and because of its greed,
And unpredictability threatens all the others.
humans. But their behavior is studied by completely different scientists.
Still, knowing these people exist gives us hope that animals will no longer be exploited for profit and will eventually take their rightful place in nature. That's all for today. If you have something to add, share it in the comments. I'd love to read it, and see you in future episodes on our channel.